Hello CIS 101. This is a video review for the Access hands-on exam. The sheet you see here is an example assignment that I sometimes do with my seated courses, and this is replicating what you will have to do for the hands-on portion for this online section of CIS 101. For the hands-on Access test, you will have to create a database from scratch. You will have to open the table in Design View, and you will have to type in the given field names, data types. You may have to change the field size. There are various field properties that you will have to edit. For example, creating an input mask, validation rule, and text. You will be given a file with the data to type into the table, and you can use a form to type it in if you would like. And then you'll have to run a query or two, and then also create a report. So right here I'm going to go through this example assignment and show you how to perform all of those tasks. So starting with opening up a brand new fresh Microsoft Office Access database. I am doing this in Access 2010. Those of you who have Office 07, the screen of course will look different, but once we get into the database, everything should be pretty similar enough to where you'll be able to accomplish it without any problem. So we always start by creating a blank database, and here is where we name the database. And on this sheet I tell you to name the database Mississippi University. So okay, when we open up a brand new fresh Access database, we have a table, and this table I want it to be saved as students. So you can right click on there to save it, right click on the tab to save it. I'm calling this students. Okay. And here are the field names, and here are the data types. So if you recall, in order to edit the data types, we go to Design View. That's this button right here. I call this the most important button in Access. So if I go to Design View, this is Design View of a table. I'm going to go ahead and type in the field names on the left. Okay, so I've entered the field names here. I've selected the data types here. Next step is to change the field sizes here. You can change the field sizes of any text field, and the reason you want to do that is by default these text fields have, if you can see down here in the field properties area, they have up to 255 allowed characters. For a database, you want to limit that so that if users are typing data in, they don't take up unneeded hard drive space. So the last name is going to be restricted to 16 characters, and you just type it in right here. First name is restricted to 22 characters, so I have to select first name up here. I come down into the field properties area, type 22 there. Next, the gender we're restricting to 1 character, either an M or an F. Okay, next the major, we're restricting that to 12 characters. Okay, now we have some additional field properties that we need to edit here. This first asterisk says to use the medium date format for the date and create an input mask. So I go to the date of birth. Down here in the field properties, the first field property is format. I click the drop down arrow and I choose medium date there. Okay, so that takes care of that. Then it also asks for an input mask, and we can create the input mask by going right here to input mask. Click on the input mask wizard button. It will prompt you to save the table. And then what kind of input mask are we looking for? Well, it's a date, so we could do the medium date input mask. or short date. Either one would work. I think the data is actually on my sheet. I list the data in regular date format, so that might be easier. So I'll create the short date format there. Now it'll be typed in like that, but once it's typed in, it will show up as the medium date format. Okay, and now this next screen in the input mask wizard is asking if you want to do any editing. That's a little bit more advanced than our 101 class gets, so we're just going to hit next and then finish. Okay, now you'll see Access inserts a bunch of numbers and symbols down here, and that's just the code that it understands to create the input mask. So we just want to leave it alone. Next it says use proper validation rule in text for gender. Okay, what that means is you want to restrict what is capable of being typed into the gender field. We want the user to only type in either an M or an F. So for the validation rule down here, you just simply type M or F. And the validation text, that's the error message that will pop up if someone tries to type in something other than an M or an F. So I'm just going to say must type M for male or F for female. And notice that Access put those quotation marks around the M and the F there, and that's Access recognizing it as text. So those are the two allowed text values for gender field. Okay. Then lastly, this you won't see on the test, but this is just for this particular assignment. You notice in my data here I have decimals. If you want decimals to be shown without the zero getting cut off and without the decimal getting truncated, you have to do these three things. You have in the number field, you have to change the field size to single, decimal places to 1, and then format to fixed. Okay, so that's here the grad, or I'm sorry, not the grad year, but the GPA. GPA, changing that field size to single, format to fixed, and decimal places to 1. Those three right there, single, fixed, and 1, I believe. Yeah. Okay, and then we have the data that we're going to type in. So I'm done editing, or designing, excuse me, I'm done designing the table. Now I go back to Data Sheet View to enter the data. It'll say, do you want to save the table? We'll say yes. And then we can type in the data, and I'll do that. I did want to show you what the input mask does. With my cursor in the date of birth, you can see the input mask there, and that just allows me to type in the date directly without having to type any of the dashes or slashes. You do have to type the full 4-digit year in this particular case. Now notice when I go to the next field, it changes to the medium date format, but I had that input mask there for the short date, which matches my data here. Okay, also notice what happens in the gender field if I try to type something other than an M or an F. I get my error message, must type M for male or F for female. Okay, so that's what that validation rule does that we created. And let me go back to it and show it to you right here for gender. That's what this does. M or F is our only allowed values. That's the rule, and here's our text. So that's what that does. So here I'll type an M and move forward. Okay, I've typed in all of the data. One thing I did want to point out, on this particular review that I'm doing, it explicitly tells you what field should be the primary key, this student number. On the test, you may have to choose for yourself which is the primary key, but that one should be obvious. And if you're not understanding what the primary key is, it should be the one field in a database that is unique to that record. So if I wanted to pull up just one record, I would do that with the primary key. So, for example, your primary key at OTC is your student ID number. If I wanted to pull up your information, I would type in your student ID number. Your primary key on Facebook, for example, is your email address. When you are logging in, your email address is that one thing that is unique to you that Facebook can use to go and retrieve your information, and only your information. Okay, so right here, student number is the primary key. That's the button you click to select it. By default, that first row is the primary key anyway. So I've got my data. Now I'm going to create a query. The first one here says create a query that shows all students who were born after 1985, and I tell you what fields to include. Okay, so this is a query in design view like you did in the chapter 13 stuff. I'm going to go ahead and close my table here. So to create a query, you click create. Now in Access 07, these query buttons here are actually at the end, and it says other here in 2010. You can see they're right here. So I click query design. I only have one table. It's the students table. I add and close. The field properties that I want you to include: first name, last name, date of birth. Several ways you can do that. So you can double click up here, first name, or you can come down here and click the drop down arrow, last name, or you can click on it and drag it and drop it, date of birth, first name, last name, date of birth, and we're looking for all students born after 1985. Okay, now this is where you are creating a query with specific criteria. So in the date of birth column down here in the criteria row, if we want after a certain date, you can type the word after, or you can use a greater than symbol. And you can't, if you're looking at a date and time, you can't just type a year. You can't just type 1985. You have to type, if I want before 1985, then you would do January 1st, 1-1-85. Okay, that would work. And when you move away, Access will recognize that as a date by putting pound symbols around it. Okay, so the last step in running a query is hitting the run button up here. Okay, so there you'll see all of the people who were born after 1988, and we can double check with our table and make sure. There's 1, 2, and 3, Karen, Tim, and Sam. Okay, so that's my query. I'm going to go ahead and close it here, and it'll prompt me to save it. I'll say yes, and on the sheet here I say save, name it Youngins. Okay, and you can see it added there. Another query, create a query that shows only students with a GPA above 3.5. Include first name, last name, grad year, and GPA. Okay, so same process, create tab, query design, add the table, hit close. We're doing first name, last name, grad year, and GPA. First name, last name, grad year, GPA. And I want students with a GPA above 3.5, so I'll do greater than 3.5. Hit run. I get 3, 3.7, 3.9, 4.0. Looking at my table just to double check, 37, 39, 40. Yeah. Okay, so that query we're going to save and call it Dean's List. So I'll close that. Save changes, yes. Call it Dean's List. Okay, so I got my table, my 2 queries, and the last thing I'm asking you to do here, create a report from the Dean's List query. Add a grouping by year. So this is creating a report using the report wizard, and we'll do that here. Create report wizard right here. And the first step in a report wizard, where is the information that you want in the report? Specifically, this question asking us to create a report from the Dean's List query. So I choose Dean's List query there, add all the fields, and here's where the grouping takes place on the second window. Do you want to add any grouping levels? I want a grouping by grad year, so I'll add that grad year grouping like that. And that's all the instructions list for that create a report. So the rest of these screens, no sorting is being done. Layout, you can choose the layout. And that's it. Okay, so there's the Dean's List report. Grouping by grad year. Of course, there's only one grad year for each of these 3, or they all have this different grad year, so that grouping doesn't really show up much. So those are all the things you'll need to know how to do for the access test. If you have any questions about this video, you feel free to email me at monroej@otc.edu.